Daddy took it and gave it to the museum.
And your dad was...
Like I said, the bodies were just tossed in. There was quite a bit of difference in the skeletons. Remember, one guy must have been close to 7 feet tall because his femur was about that long.
Okay.
And let's see, what else do I know about it? Like I said, they just topped in on top of each other, and like it's been thrown in the trench. There were several mini balls in the skeletons. The most unusual thing we found was a hunk of lead about that big around, and it was in the collarbone right here. And when we found it,
shell fragment, possibly.
I assume I never have understood exactly what it was. It wasn't a mini ball, just a big hunk of lead about that big, and it fractured the collarbone or splintered it. It was right there.
How deep was it, or how?
It was embedded in the bone.
Was it circular?
No, it was more oblong shaped. Right like that.
Oh.
Now, Estes, who was at this Memorial Museum at that time,
Right.
came out and was out here. He took that and put it on display, and it was in the War Memorial Museum for many years until they moved to the new location.
Do you know if it made over to the TPAC location?
I have no idea. I've never seen it since they moved. I've only been to the new museum once or twice. I haven't lived in Houston, Nashville since.
Did they have any of the bones on display also, or just this piece of metal?
No, the collarbone that the lead was in was on display along with it.
Okay.
So it was a piece of bone about that long, and I think it's from here to here.
But as far as you know, the 17 bodies in this...
They're all there. We just put them there, covered them up, except for what Estes took.
So you all covered them back up yourself?
Yeah.
Who actually dug?
Me.
You actually dug it up yourself?
Yeah. By training, I'm a geologist.
Okay.
And amateur archaeologist. And of course, once we got into it, we realized what it was.
And how deep were the bones from the surface, you think?
2 feet.
Oh, well, we should have hit it right here then.
Should have hit it right there.
You know, he stopped right about here.
Well, that's just about where
This is where he stopped, and this is where we made him start again.
it ran. Last to my recollection, the Stohler stopped off right about here. Like I say, within 10 feet inside.
Right.
We dug the trench up, I would say, to about right about here. And it was still going, we just quit. It was obvious what we were doing.
Well, that would have been, the Union forces were coming from that direction, so that would have been a perpendicular trench.
Yeah, now, at the time, we weren't aware there'd been a Civil War battle out here. Now, I had plowed up a whole bunch of mini balls in that field there when I was plowing corn as a kid. And in fact, when they put the roads in, we named the street Shiloh back there because we knew there'd been something going on here.
Right.
But then when we dug this up, which was after we put the streets in, or named them, we found the trench. I never could find that much about it until I read Horn's book. It was published in 65 or whatever.
He actually described the Davidson house on this hill, which was not correct. It was over where Brookmead School
it over
is.
there.
Well, no, it said in his book, it says the southeast corner from Davidson Road and Charlotte, which this would be the southeast side. That'd be the southwest side.
So this is the book I'm referring to. Where was that published?
Yeah, that's what I used also.
Published in
57, 56.
56. So let me get a map out. They fell back out Charlotte Pike.
Right.
And as it says here, Chambers ordered the brigades to fall back to new position about 2 miles farther out the pike.
Right. That's from the McPherson's men's shop.
Yeah, here a
the
line
initial position
was established along the ridge beyond a little creek, which empties into the Cumberland
Right.
This side of Davidson's house,
Mm-hmm.
and opposite Bell's Mill, his left resting on the river, his line stretching some distance across the pike. So that would be this ridge right here.
Because they would block both sides of the road all the way down. See, their Kelly's battery was right there. They had the Union gunboats were up here. And the shells came over this hill out of
Now there was also some
eyesight.
fortifications right here, used to be.
Okay, I hadn't been over there.
Yeah, there were some stone fortifications right there.
Okay. We found shell fragments and mini balls and canisters in here, and it looks like there's some earthworks. This is where Walmart's going in.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So there's a big stink. There's also some Indian stone box graves in there also.
I knew they were bound to be around here.
Some of which have already been robbed. There's about, I think, 11 that are still intact back there.
That's interesting. I knew they were out here, but I just never...
That's where I'm going next. But Finch's, the U.S. Navy was right in here. The Confederates had blocked the river at this point and actually captured a couple of barges. But they had the river blocked, and the Union from this end, at Harpeth Shoals, the water was down, and they couldn't get up. And 2 or 3 or 4 Union gunboats were stuck in here.
Well, this is right here. He also had suggested the commander of one of the Federal gunboats that by dropping down to near Bell's Bend, or Bell's Mills, he might...
Enfilade.
Yeah.
See, if he'd gotten right there, he could have raked down the side, but they never could get past.
Well, that explains the fortifications right in here then. But at any rate, that shell that we found looked like it came from the riverboat, our gunboat.
Yeah.
It was about that big around and about that long.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And like I say,
How far over in here did you all find? So at least Shiloh Drive, you found things over the
have you
years.
seen the old slave fence at the end of the old Davidson place?
No.
This is part of the old Davidson farm right here.
Right.
And there's a stone fence that went all the way around our place. We bought, or my dad bought, a couple hundred acres in here.
Okay.
In fact, that house, stone house is built out of fence.
Right.
But the fence is still there, and the other side of the fence, to my knowledge, was never in cultivation. Now this whole area right through here was in cultivation. I mean, it was open until it was subdivided and trees grew up. So back to this stone fence, we found the mini balls.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed the stone fence? Go down the corner here and turn left, and that's about 200 yards. You across, if you watch for it, around top of the hill. Old stone fence about so high.
Well, Ross Massey had some pretty good documentation on the battle being here. He wasn't aware of this hillside until I brought it to his attention, but if you look at it from a military standpoint, I mean, it makes perfect sense to obviously be on both sides of the road and the high ground on the other side of the road up here, but from everything that we've researched, and it's very sketchy at this point, it looks like most of this was Union cavalry that charged this position against Confederate cavalry.
Yeah, but there was a big enough battle here to leave mini balls and stuff. And like I say, I couldn't find anything about it until Warren's book came out.
If you could tell me about the what you heard the old timers say also.
Yeah, the Davidson house. Okay, here's Brookmead School. The Davidson house sat right on the top of that hill, right there. And the foundation was still there in the 40s. So I know where it was. But hearing the old timers talk, that house was hit in that battle by the riverboats, gunboats, as well as...
Did it destroy the house or just damage it?
No, it didn't destroy it, just went through it. Hit it.
Right.
Several shots hit it. And another house, which was right about...
Okay, the Bass house.
Well, Napiers lived there when...
It's rare to find out. Oh, this is the paperwork, the documentation that you have.
What little documentation it is. The date on this is 56.
Okay. That makes sense with the records for the development of the subdivision.
Yeah, and here's a contract of loan. Estes came out, Fred Estes. I'll give you a copy of this.
Okay.
But Fred Estes came out and was here with us while we dug it up. I'm a sword collector, and I've had dealings with him before. I've given him some Civil War swords and stuff. But at any rate, he came out, and like I say, took that piece of the collarbone with a big hunk of lead in it back to the museum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lead bullet.
But what he says here, instead of saying, yeah, fossils and rocks.
You know why?
Yeah, I know why. Because they didn't want any record of any skeletons.
Police report. So there was never any police investigation of the bodies.
Not that once we knew what it was, as a Civil War remains. My dad didn't want anybody to come out here to dig it either.
Was this about the time the interstate went through here? Was that?
Seemed like it was before.
Yeah, I'm thinking
just about before, somewhere in there. I don't think the interstate was here quite at that time, but they were working on it.
Do you know if they uncovered anything when they put the interstate through here?
No. They probably did, but nobody was aware of it. Because, as you said earlier, there was no big amount of knowledge about the battle out here.
Well, now, if they had investigated this, I wonder if that would have blocked the development. Certainly would have slowed it down. Would that have been a motivating force?
Could have been.
Yeah.
It could have been.
Because they could have ended up unearthing bodies from here all the way to the river.
Yeah.
And the police would have.
Well, I don't think people were that interested in it in 56.
Yeah.
See, that was only about 91 years after it happened.
Yeah.
And, I mean, people were interested, but they weren't protective of it, or it wasn't a big deal to find Civil War remains. But at any rate, no, there was no mention made of skeletons in here or Civil War or anything.
So nothing after that was ever discussed or surveyed?
No, that was the end of it.
And Fred Estes...
There's a copy of the envelope. And he even got my dad's name wrong on here, which he called George Miles instead of Ralph Miles.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. At what point did he actually come out here?
When we started to dig it up, we called him and let him know we were going to do it.
So he came out to
I take that
supervise
back.
it? Or?
Take it back. At first, we didn't know whether it was a Civil War or Indian. The skull. Bullet was unearthed. So we dug up, I guess, that far and realized what it was then, and called him, and he came right on out.
So you all stopped after 17 bodies?
Yeah, fragments of 17 bodies. It could have, been a little bit more or less, but that was about what I remember.
Okay.
No, going back 40 years, like.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no. No buttons, so that
there wasn't a piece of metal in there.
Okay. Well, the reports that I heard was that the bodies were stripped for some reason, maybe even burned.
I had no sign of burning. There was no charcoaling or black. The bones were pretty white. They were fairly competent. They've been there for 90 years. Coherent. The ground was, you could see the outlines of the bodies, so I don't think they'd been burned. You could see, in the dirt. You could see the top of the trench, you could see outlines, the difference in the dirt. It was just amazing how well preserved that stuff was. And I thought, that was 40 years ago, 90 years after the battle. We handled those bones as we dug. We took out the bones one by one and laid them out on the ground until we got through digging and realized what we were doing.
Who else assisted you?
My brother.
Okay.
He's a lawyer in Washington now. and Estes. My brother and I did the dig at Estes West. He was a guy about my age, an old guy. But anyway, we dug very carefully using paintbrush and trowel. You can see the outlines of parts of the body in places, as I mentioned earlier. You can see where the stomach was, what was in the stomach, straw, hay.
I don't know why the bodies would have been stripped if they were Confederates, because their clothes were generally not very
Well, I was going to say, they
useful
were,
to.
some of them were still barefooted, some of them didn't have enough clothes. This was in the winter of 63, 64 rather.
Yeah, that's pretty well
January.
documented.
And they were, from what I read, they needed all the clothes and food they could get. Shoes.
No shoes.
No signs of leather.
Nothing.
No signs of any cloth or metal buttons.
The only metal was the mini balls.
The mini balls and that hunk of lead I told you about.
How many mini balls do you think you saw within the
Probably
trench?
4 or 5. I think I still got one of those at home in Houston.
Anything unusual about it? Is it a round one or one of the?
It was white lead.
Yeah, the pointed type, not the ball.
Okay. Talking about that reminds me, my father-in-law and mother-in-law lived right here on top of this hill. And 4 or 5 years ago, somebody came out and dug up a bunch of, with a metal detector, found a bunch of cartridges, cases, in their front yard right there.
Okay. They were still encased. Hadn't been fired.
No, they'd been fired. They were about that long. About
the Spencer carbines,
yeah,
probably.
Yeah, which sounds cavalry.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would love to have known about this much earlier. And
That's the original Miles track.
yeah, the original Miles track. I can't talk without a pencil. Here's the original farm right here. And it was all part of the old original Davidson farm.
Which probably encompassed
A huge area.
huge part of this.
Yeah. And again, the Davidson house was
Brookmead School.
Oh, well, there's. I was looking for the Brookmead School. It's on this hill right here.
Right behind.
Yeah, but when you read Horn's book again, Davidson House, later burned, was just south, should be southwest of the intersection of Davidson Road with Charlotte Pike. There's the intersection of Davidson Road and Charlotte right there.
Now that's the original intersection of Davidson. Now this Davidson Road that dead ends here, I'm a little confused on. I thought that was the original Davidson. It was always over there. They tried to put it through here and during the interstate development, because if you look at the property plans, this clematis was supposed to connect with it right here.
The plans were made before the interstate. And this Davidson Road right here, they changed it to run straight through. When they put the interstate in, they dead ended it there and went back to the original Davidson over here.
So that is the original.
That's the original intersection right there.
Okay.
Which is just, and the house is just southwest of the intersection.
Mm-hmm.
Which, pretty well pinpoints it. And this ridge right here is, up on that.
Well, I'm convinced that they were here. It's unfortunate there's no official documentation, but you would think that this would be enough, but apparently it wasn't to get anybody's attention. Get down there that you were talking about, River Road and Charlotte.
Yeah, there was an old grocery store down there when we first moved out here around 1940. And the old timers used to sit around the big old cast iron stove and talk. And they were in their 70s and 80s at that time.
Right.
Which means they were little kids, some of them, when the battle occurred. And I remember the shelling and hitting the Davidson house, what we call the Napier house.
Okay. And this hill also?
And there were no houses on this hill that I know of.
Okay.
But they talk more about the gunboats rather than the battle here, the gunboat shelling. I never heard about a battle being fought here, as far as cavalry or trenches go.
Well, Ross Massey's got some documentation. There's the original stoneworks of the bridge. You can still see if you go into the filling station over there. Phillips 66, and look down in that creek where it goes underneath the Charlotte. That's the original stoneworks for that bridge. And what happened, according to him, and I forget where he got his documentation, the cavalry got all tripped up on that bridge. They got hit pretty hard by the Confederates with some flanking fire, probably from this position down the river, and these guys are falling over themselves on this bridge in retreat, and it was pretty much a turkey shoot for quite a while.
Well, from the mini balls I found, this was a larger engagement than I think people have realized in the past.
Yeah. And for some reason it was, I don't want to say covered up, but certainly not
it was
documented.
Part of a retreat. It was the day after the Battle of Nashville. A disaster.
Now this was the first.
Slope right here. Knock the top off the skull. I guess right about here, 10 feet either way.
Okay.
There.
If you had to run a reference point, what from here would you say?
Oh,
I know it's hard to.
probably right about towards the corner of the house. Maybe a little bit more this way.
See, what confused me when my brother talked to your mother in the late 80s, she pointed to what he said was a
Cedar tree?
cedar tree, which I was thinking was that one.
It wasn't that one. It was right here. I cut it down 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
And when you said cedar tree, I realized.
Well, there was one here until just recently also.
Yeah, that was the one that she was talking about.
Okay.
But the trench would have stopped, as near as I can tell now. We dug it up from about right there where we found it. Say from right about here. Somewhere right about here. And it was still going.
And it looked like to you that was a trench, a military.
Yes, it was about that wide, about that deep. The skeletons were about that far below the surface, piled on top of each other.
Because normally, after the battle, they just roll them into the trench and bury them. But since this was cavalry, Ross Massey was a little skeptical of the fact that they would have had trenches here at all. But they certainly had enough time to build
They had
them.
a trench. I mean,
It was definitely.
I don't think they would have dug the trench after the battle.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they were dug in out here. Well, maybe Horn's book says that they were dug in. But at any rate, yeah, I'm sure that was a trench.
Okay, so if something's going to be found, it's probably going to start about right here.
Yeah, start about probably 10 feet either side.
Yeah.
But another trench like the one they dug out there, right about, so right through here. Hard to hit it. Say from the edge of the driveway out to here.
Of course, they're not going to do that now, since we've already dug once.
Yeah. But incidentally, I volunteered to come up here when the archaeologist said he was going to dig, and he said no need. He didn't want me up here.
They knew. My feeling was they knew where it was, and they knew where they wanted to dig, where they wouldn't.
But I was going down to the museum and see if they had that stuff, but I didn't get a chance. I'm coming back in. We got a place in Gatlinburg the 29th of August, so I'll be back through here after that.
Okay, well, that'd be helpful. I'll go look myself and see if anything. So it's kind of an oval metal. How thick?
It's kind of round, about that big around.
Okay.
Oval shape. The best of my memory, I'm talking about 40 years ago now.
Well, that would have been canister.
Yeah, it sounds like it, but I've never seen anything just like it. Oh, now, I forgot to mention, about 15 years ago, I got a metal detector and went over the hill out here and found several pieces of shrapnel and shells, but no big shells again. Okay. But it wasn't a mini ball, and I've never seen anything just like it.
You don't think it was a canister,
Very well have been.
grape shot?
Could very well have been.
Because we found grape shot down there, but about this big around.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
But it could have been misshaped by impact.
Right. That would make sense.
But it was lead. And like I say, it was at the museum on display, I guess, for 20 years. 20?
Yeah, I get the feeling there's even more.
Irwin land. Of course, there were huge farms out here at that time. Yeah. So you can, this went all the way around the place on this side.
Okay, yeah. Still going down that way.
And I'm sure it was used as part of the fortifications. It came down and went back to Romulus Ridge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See, this is another high point on this ridge. You go see there.
Right. So you all found all your stuff from this side over.
Yeah, we never looked over here. This was always woods and uncultivated ground. But
Do you think it was uncultivated back then?
yeah, I think so. I think so because it was so heavy.
Yeah.
I know this was 90 years after the battle, and those big trees were about that size in.
So the cavalry probably wouldn't have come through.
I don't think they would have come through here very easily.
They would have had to sweep around.
Well, they could come, but you couldn't very well come and attack through the woods
Yeah.
with cavalry.
Uh-oh.
And I rode horses all over that place as a kid. And there were big open fields, but not right here. But this was open in here. There were trees, big trees back around the house. But from where that second telephone pole back, this was all open field.
Okay.
You can see this road right over here called Shallow.
Was this cultivated before your family took?
Yes.
So it'd been a working farm for quite some time.
See that back road, Shallow sign over there?
Uh huh.
We named that street Shallow because of all the remains of the battle we found up here.
Say about 100 mini balls and all.
That's what I kept. I plowed up. I kept the good mini balls. I didn't keep the misshapen ones or the half. I just kept the whole ones that were nice.
Huh.
Yeah, at the time we didn't realize there was a battle out here. We just knew we'd find a bunch of Civil War type bullets. Why we picked the Battle of Shiloh to name this after, I don't remember.
It's the first major loss of
Anyway,
casualties.
we found a whole bunch of mini balls up here. From here all the way back to that second telephone pole down there.
Okay.
And yet at the time we knew of no battle out here.
Well, this would have been the back side of the hill. Again, they're coming
From that way,
this way.
they would have hit back in here.
I ought to talk to some of these people. I bet
Well,
people.
I asked these people here about 10 years ago if we could use a metal detector, and they said, yeah, but they didn't. I never seen any signs of anything. But I used to fly them up out here.
Yeah. I'm sure there's still a lot.
I never found hardly anything from this hill going down the other side.
It was all over here.
Yeah.
Huh.
You want to drive back to that spring?
Yeah.
I'll show you where it was.
Well, I just wonder if the cavalry dismounted, they'd want to keep their horses back behind the hill, tied them up back on this side.
They had them tied up back there. I'm not sure how much cavalry. The way I read it in Horn, it was all cavalry.
Yeah.
But when
There was some infantry that came out sharp.
creek was filled in by the subdividers right here. There were all kind of fortifications, trenches back along this trench.
So there's nothing left there.
No,